November 16th, 1944. A shattered farmhouse cellar near Wassenach, Germany. The world outside is a symphony of destruction. The relentless, grinding artillery of the American First Army has chewed the Hurtgen forest into a hellscape of splintered trees and frozen mud. Down here, below the earth, the air is thick with the dust of pulverized plaster, the metallic tang of spent cartridges, and the smell of fear. A single bare bulb, powered by a sputtering generator, swings on its cord, casting manic shadows that dance with the concussion of each new shell landing nearby. This is the command post for a skeletal remnant of the 272nd Volksgrenadier Division, and it is being overrun. Shouts in English echo from the top of the stone steps. The splintering crash of the cellar door is followed by the heavy, authoritative thud of M1 Garand stocks hitting the floor. GIs from the 28th Infantry Division, faces slick with rain and streaked with grime, pour into the cramped space. Their eyes are wide, feral, accustomed to the savage close-quarters fighting this forest demands. They are the men of the bloody bucket, and they have paid for every inch of this ground in blood. They find what they expect, a handful of dazed, hollow-eyed German soldiers, hands rising in surrender almost before the command is barked. A wounded officer groans on a cot, his face the color of old parchment. But then they see her. Huddled in the corner, almost lost in the shadows, is a young woman. She can't be more than 22. She wears the field gray uniform of a Wehrmacht-Helferin, a female auxiliary. Her blonde hair is matted and tucked beneath a service cap. Her hands, pale and trembling slightly, are still on the knobs of a tornister and Funger radio set. The headphones are still pressed to her ears, as if she is listening for a ghost. She had been trying to send one last message, one final report into a void that no longer cared. "Hey, look what we got here," a private mutters, his voice a low growl of surprise and suspicion. A Fraulein. A sergeant, a man named Kowalski with a face like a road map of New Jersey, steps forward. The beam of his flashlight cuts through the gloom and pins her against the damp stone wall. She doesn't flinch. She just stares back, her blue eyes defiant, almost unnervingly calm. She slowly, deliberately removes the headphones and places them on the console. She rises to her feet. Or rather, she tries to. The movement is stiff, unnatural. A flicker of something sharp and deep crosses her features, a tightening around her mouth, a subtle wince that is almost swallowed by the shadows. She pushes herself up with the radio desk, her knuckles white. To the battle-hardened GIs, it looks like the exhaustion and fear they've seen 1,000 times. Just another Kraut surrendering. "Raus, on your feet, Hände hoch," Kowalski barked. The woman understands. She raises her hands, but her posture remains rigid, her back ramrod straight, as if bending is an impossibility. As she is prodded towards the stairs, one of the younger soldiers makes a crude remark. Kowalski silences him with a glare. There is a war to fight, and this is just another prisoner. They lead her out into the churning chaos of the forest. The German artillery has begun its counterbarrage. The air rips apart with the sound of incoming rounds. The terrifying shriek of the nebula Werfer rockets the GIs have nicknamed Screaming Mimes. Rain, cold and relentless, slicks the mud into a treacherous soup. She is marched with the other prisoners, a small gray figure in a world of brown and green. She keeps her face a mask of stoic indifference, but with every step, every lurch through the sucking mud, she has to fight the fire that is climbing her spine. Every jarring motion sends a jolt of agony through her body. She stumbles, not from a root or a rock, but from a wave of pain so intense it makes the world go white at the edges. A GI grabs her arm, howls her upright without ceremony. She bites down on her lip, hard. The taste of blood is a familiar anchor in the storm. She cannot show weakness, not here, not to them. She is a German soldier, and they will see nothing but strength until the very end. The march continues, one agonizing step at a time, deeper into enemy territory.
The POW collection point is less a camp and more an open wound in the forest. It's a muddy clearing carved out by engineers, populated by makeshift tents and shivering columns of men. German and American wounded lie on stretchers side by side, their shared misery a temporary truce. The air is a foul cocktail, diesel fumes from idling deuce-and-a-halfs, wet wool, blood, and the sharp, clean smell of carbolic acid that fails to cover the stench of infection. The rain has not stopped. It drums a ceaseless, dreary rhythm on the Kansas tents and turns the ground into a quagmire that sucks at the boots of the living. Anneliese Richter, the signals auxiliary from the cellar, is herded into a holding pen with 24 other prisoners. She stands, refusing the relative comfort of a wet ammunition crate that serves as a bench. Standing is bearable. Sitting is the enemy. She wraps her arms around herself, a futile attempt to ward off the bone-deep chill that has settled in her limbs. Her uniform is soaked through, heavy as lead. Through the maelstrom of activity, Captain Elias Vance moves with a weary, practiced efficiency. He is a battalion surgeon with the 28th Division's 103rd Medical Battalion. His face is etched with fatigue, his eyes shadowed by the things he has seen in this forest. He has been triaging casualties for 36 hours straight, making impossible choices. The man with the gut wound or the boy with the shattered leg? The American corporal or the German private? He operates on a grim calculus of survival, his humanity buried under layers of clinical necessity. He sees the new batch of prisoners being processed. To him, they are liabilities, more mouths to feed, more bodies to guard, more potential problems in a system already strained to the breaking point. He notices the woman among them, a brief flicker of professional interest before he dismisses it. She is on her feet, seems unharmed. She is low priority. Get the GI sorted first, he tells a young medic, Corporal Miller. Miller is younger than Vance, his face not yet fully hardened by the war. He nods, but his eyes keep drifting back to the German woman. He watches as she subtly shifts her weight from one foot to the other. He sees her gaze fall on a log where other prisoners are sitting, a flicker of something that looks like longing, immediately followed by fear. It's odd. Everyone else, exhausted from the fighting and the march, scrambles for a place to sit. She actively avoids it. She finally gives in, her body trembling with exhaustion. She lowers herself towards the edge of an overturned ration crate, moving with the slow, deliberate care of a woman twice her age. But as her weight settles, her back goes rigid. Her breath catches in a sharp, audible hiss. Her eyes screw shut for a second, and her hands clench into fists at her sides. It is a portrait of pure, unadulterated agony, suppressed in an instant. She forces her expression back into a neutral mask, but the damage is done. Miller saw it. He approaches Captain Vance again, his voice hesitant. Sir, that woman, the Helferin. Vance doesn't look up from the soldier who's bandaging. What about her, Miller? She got a scratch? No, sir, it's the way she moves, or doesn't move. I just saw her try to sit down. Sir, I think she's seriously hurt. Vance sighs, a gust of impatient air. Miller, they're all hurt. Tired, hungry, scared. It's war. If she's not bleeding and she's not screaming, she goes to the back of the line. With respect, Captain, this is different, Miller insists, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence. It's not a combat wound, it's something else. Every time she moves her lower body, she looks like she's going to pass out, but she's trying to hide it. The insistence in the young corporal's voice finally cuts through Vance's fatigue, and injuring someone tries to hide is often the worst kind. He ties off the bandage and straightens up, his back protesting. He wipes his hands on a dirty rag and lets his gaze travel across the muddy pen. He finds her. She is standing again, perfectly still, her face turned away, staring into the dripping skeletal trees. She looks like a statue carved from ice. But Miller is right. There's a tension in her stillness, a coiled spring of pain that even from 50 yards away is palpable. Vance's professional curiosity, the doctor that lives beneath the jaded officer, begins to stir. He watches her for a long moment, the rain dripping from the brim of his helmet. Then he makes a decision. All right, Miller, he says, his voice low. Bring her to the medical tent. Let's see what she's hiding.
The medical tent is an island of fragile order and the sea of chaos. A single gasoline lantern hisses from a pole, its harsh white light bleaching the color from everything, casting long, dancing shadows against the canvas walls. The air inside is warm, thick with the smells of antiseptic, blood, and brewing coffee. For a soldier coming in from the cold, it should be a place of relief. For Annalise Richter, it is a place of judgment. She stands before Captain Vance, with Corporal Miller a few feet away, her posture as straight and unyielding as a flagpole. The defiance is back in her eyes, a shield against the fear. Vance looks her over. Up close, he can see the faint blue smudges of exhaustion under her eyes, the tremor in her hands she tries to conceal by clenching them behind her back. Sprechen Sie English? He asks, his voice flat, professional. She hesitates for a moment, then gives a curt shake of her head. It's a lie. She speaks it well enough, but she will give this American captain nothing. Ich heiße Annalise Richter, Nachrichtenhelferin, she says, her voice steady. Vance switches to the clumsy, utilitarian German he's picked up on the front. Verletzungen? Are you injured? Nein, she replies instantly. Ich habe keine Verletzungen. I have no injuries. Vance's eyes narrow. Corporal Miller seems to think otherwise. He says you are in pain. Der Korporal irrt sich, she says coolly. The corporal is mistaken. Ich bin nur müde. I am only tired. The denial is too quick, too forceful. Vance has dealt with soldiers on both sides who hide wounds to avoid being taken off the line, or in the case of prisoners, out of fear. But this feels different. It's not pride. It's something deeper. Sit down, he says, gesturing to the folding canvas cot against the tent wall. Auf den Tisch, sitzen. Annaliese's eyes dart to the cot, and for the first time her composure cracks. A flicker of pure panic crosses her face before she wrestles it back under control. She does not move. The simple command hangs in the air between them, a declaration of war in this tiny, quiet space. That's an order, Fraulein, Vance says, his patience wearing thin. The doctor is receding, the captain is reemerging. Sit on the examination table. She understands the English word order. She takes a slow, hesitant step toward the cot, as if it were rigged with explosives. Her movements are wooden, her legs seemingly locked at the hips. She reaches the edge and stops, her body vibrating with tension. She looks from the cot to Vance's implacable face and knows there is no escape. Slowly, painfully, she lowers herself. She tries to perch on the very edge, taking the weight on her arms, but Vance shakes her head. All the way, sit properly. She closes her eyes. A shudder runs through her entire frame. As she shifts her weight fully onto the cot, a gasp, sharp and strangled, is torn from her throat. She arches her back, her knuckles turning white where she grips the metal frame. The sound is not loud, but in the quiet of the tent, it is a confession, an admission of an agony she can no longer conceal. That's it. Vance's medical instincts take over completely. This is not a malingerer. This is not a stubborn prisoner. This is a patient in extreme distress. All right, that's enough, he says, his voice softer now. I need to examine you. I need to see what's causing that. 9, she says, the word sharp, desperate. She tries to push herself up. Bitte, 9, please, no. Vance holds up a hand, not to threaten, but to calm. You are a prisoner of war under my care. According to the Geneva Convention, you will receive medical treatment. It is my duty. He turns to Miller. Help me. Gently but firmly, they guide her to lie face down on the cot. She resists for a moment, a surge of frantic, desperate strength, but she is too weak, too exhausted. She finally collapses onto the rough wool blanket, burying her face in her arms. Her shoulders begin to shake. She is not fighting anymore. She is surrendering to a fate she has dreaded more than capture, more than interrogation. Vance picks up a pair of surgical scissors. Her field gray wool trousers are caked with mud and damp. He makes the first cut near the waistband, intending to expose her lower back. He cuts down through the thick fabric. He parts the material. And then he stops. The scissors hang frozen in his hand. Miller, leaning over his shoulder to provide more light with a handheld lamp, lets out a soft, involuntary gasp. The entire tent seems to fall silent. The only sound is the hissing of the lantern and the relentless drumming of the rain on the canvas, a sound that suddenly feels like a slow, mournful drumbeat. What lies beneath the uniform is not the pale, unmarked skin of a young woman. It is a roadmap of old brutality.
The light from Miller's lamp spills across Annaliese's skin, revealing the truth she had fought so desperately to conceal. It is not a fresh wound of dowdle. There is no blood, no torn muscle from shrapnel, no neat puncture from a bullet. This is a canvas of old, healed-over violence. Her lower back and the tops of her thighs are covered in a horrific tapestry of scars, a series of thin, parallel lines, faded to a silvery white, crisscross the skin, the unmistakable mark of a whip or a rod, laid on with systematic precision. Interspersed with these are darker, puckered circles of tissue, the classic keloid scarring of deliberate burns, as if from a lit cigar or a heated piece of metal. They are not random. There is a pattern to the cruelty, a sense of methodical application that is far more chilling than any accidental injury. These wounds were not inflicted in the heat of combat. They were administered slowly, deliberately, with the intention of causing maximum pain while leaving a permanent record. Captain Vance, a man who had set compound fractures and sutured gaping chest wounds in this very tent, feels a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He has seen the terrible things war does to the human body. This was not war. This was something else. This was torture. He and Miller stand frozen for a long moment, the unspoken horror hanging in the air between them. The enemy they had dehumanized, the kraut in the field gray uniform, has just been violently, irrevocably rehumanized. The woman lying on the cot is no longer just a prisoner. She is a victim. Vance slowly lowers the scissors. He looks at Annaliese's head, buried in the crook of her arm. The shaking of her shoulders has intensified into silent, racking sobs. The rigid defiance, the icy shield she had maintained since her capture, has shattered into a million pieces. All that is left is shame, humiliation, and the ghost of an agony that clearly has never left her. The doctor in Vance begins to connect the terrible dots. A young woman, a signals auxiliary, captured deep within her own lines. Wounds that are weeks, perhaps months old. The refusal to sit, the searing pain caused by pressure on the scarred tissue. His mind cycles through the grim possibilities. Was she a political dissident, punished for a perceived failure? Had she fallen into the hands of the Gestapo, or worse, the SS? The questions are a dark, swirling vortex, but he knows he will not ask them. To force her to speak of it would be a new violation, another layer of trauma laid upon the old. The scars told their own story, a silent testament to an ordeal he could barely comprehend. The atmosphere in the tent has changed completely. The clinical detachment of the medic and the suspicion of the capture have evaporated, replaced by a heavy, somber wave of compassion. This is no longer about us versus them. It is about a human being who has suffered immensely. Vance's voice, when he finally speaks, is quiet, stripped of all authority and harshness. It is the voice of a doctor speaking to a patient. "Miller," he says softly, not taking his eyes off the girl, "get me a basin of warm water, some sterile gauze, and the jar of sulfanilamide powder." He adds, almost as an afterthought, "and the burn salve, the one with the analgesic." Miller, looking pale and shaken, nods without a word and moves to the medical supply chest. He has seen men die in his arms this week, but the sight of these old, deliberately inflicted wounds has unsettled him in a way combat never has. Vance pulls a small stool over and sits beside the cot. He waits for Miller to return with the supplies. He takes a piece of gauze, soaks it in the warm water, and gently, carefully, begins to clean the area around the worst of the scarred tissue. The skin is inflamed, irritated by the rough uniform and the days of marching. He expects her to flinch away from his touch, to recoil. She doesn't. She just lies there, her body surrendering to his care. The quiet weeping continues, a sound of profound release, as the American doctor, her enemy, begins to treat the wounds inflicted by her own side, his gentle touch a stark contrast to the brutality that created them.
The work is slow and methodical. Captain Vance cleans the inflamed skin with a tenderness that feels alien in the brutal context of the Hyrcan forest. He applies a thin layer of soothing analgesic salve over the most painful-looking scars, his movements economical and sure. He is no longer Captain Vance of the 28th Infantry Division. He is Dr. Vance from Philadelphia, a man who took an oath to relieve suffering, an oath that made no distinction for the color of a uniform. He works in silence, respecting the privacy of her grief. Annalise's sobs slowly subside into a quiet, exhausted stillness. The tension that had held her body rigid for days finally begins to seep away. When he is finished, he covers the area with a large, sterile dressing, taping it securely in place. He pulls her torn uniform trousers back down to give her some measure of dignity before gently draping a thick, gray Army-issue wool blanket over her. He prepares a syringe of morphine. It's a precious commodity, usually reserved for fresh, severe trauma. But he knows her pain is not just physical. The memories attached to those scars are a wound that will never truly heal. He swabs her arm and administers the dose. "This will help with the pain," he says, his voice low. He doesn't know if she understands his English or his broken German anymore, and it doesn't matter. The intent is clear. He then does something that is not in any medical manual or military protocol. He walks over to his personal footlocker, rummages inside, and pulls out two things, his own canteen and a half-eaten D-ration chocolate bar. He walks back to the cot. Annalise has pushed herself up slightly, her face tear-streaked and pale in the lantern light. Her eyes, no longer defiant, are wide and filled with a confusing mixture of fear, bewilderment, and a flicker of gratitude. He unscrews the cap of the canteen and holds it out to her. "Bosser," he says simply. She hesitates for a second, then takes it with a trembling hand and drinks, long and deep. He breaks off a piece of the chocolate and offers it to her. For a prisoner who has likely been on starvation rations for weeks, it is a gesture of profound, unexpected kindness. She takes it, her fingers brushing his, and gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. No words are exchanged. None are needed. In the quiet of the tent, a silent, temporary truce has been declared. It is not a truce between nations, but between two human beings, a recognition of shared humanity in a world that has gone insane.
Vance looks over at Corporal Miller, who has been watching the entire scene, his expression unreadable. The young medic has just received an education that no field manual could ever provide. He has learned that the enemy is not a faceless monolith, but a collection of individuals, each with their own story, their own pain. He has seen how quickly the lines of war can blur, how judgment can dissolve into compassion in the face of terrible suffering. Annalise Richter is eventually moved from the forward aid station. She is just one of thousands of prisoners processed that winter, her name logged on a manifest before she disappears into the vast, anonymous machinery of the POW system. Her ultimate fate, like that of so many, is lost to history. But she is not forgotten. For Captain Elias Vance, she would forever be more than just another German prisoner. In the years after the guns fell silent, when he returned to a quiet medical practice in Pennsylvania, her memory would surface at unexpected times. He would remember the defiant girl in the muddy cellar, the silent agony in her eyes, and the shocking, horrific story told by the scars she bore. He would remember the moment the enemy in front of him ceased to be a symbol of a hostile nation and became simply a young woman who had been grievously wronged. It was a reminder that the deepest wounds of war are not always delivered by the enemy, and that the most profound scars are often the ones hidden from sight, carried in silence, long after the fighting is over.